Well, I guess we've done it now. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Squatch. This is Preparation H, and splitting the tractor was not in the original plan. But, well, things have changed a bit in the last 24 hours. Quick recap. Well, I was going to do all this transmission work through this opening down here. It's entirely possible. But, well, things have changed a little bit. It's not going to be as straightforward as I thought. And, well, those little three-word phrases like might as well and we're already here. We've got a split tractor. All right, so I'll get to all the details in a bit, but first I'm going to work on getting this torque tube removed and open up a nice clear alley between the two halves of the tractor. Air cleaner. Starter. Fuel tank support bracket is up next, and we might as well take that stay rod that goes up to the radiator because it just loves to be in the way. And finally, we work the torque tube off. There, we've created quite a lot of working room now. I can walk right through, unimpeded. So, what are we doing here? Well, the reason why we're getting into this to begin with, and also the reason why I believe this is so noisy in first through fourth gears, is because, well, back in the day, Squatch buys this tractor. It always had a little bit of a gear whine, but, you know, the straight cut gears in these old Farmalls do that. You're never going to get completely away from it. It's just the nature of the beast. But this one was a little louder than most. And I was, well, running it that way because it is what it is. Until one day I was doing some belt work and it just started throwing 80-90 right out the bottom. So we've got something going on. Well, what had been happening the whole time I've had it, well, it had some loose bearings on the input right here. And it's a short little shaft. You can see it ends right there. That's all we've got. So 2 ball bearings. And over time they had slowly worn looser and looser, and that created an uneven gear mesh between this small one at the front and that larger one off the end of my finger down there on the front of the counter shaft. These are known as constant mesh gears, okay? Whenever that input shaft is spinning, whether you're in neutral or not, those gears are grinding away. And after years and years of this input slowly being able to cant off to the side because of loose bearings, it gradually worn an uneven face across each tooth. Until one day, the bearings let go completely. It really laid back, took out the seal, started dropping the 80-90, and then I decided we need to fix this. Found the loose bearings, said I'm going to do it right, and I re-bearinged everything that needed it in this whole back end. The trouble is, after I put brand new bearings on the input and I returned that back to its proper axis, well, the areas of the teeth that weren't really up against each other before with it crooked, all of a sudden were the only areas in contact, and that made the noise 3 to 4 times as loud as it was before with brand new bearings. So, good job me. I fixed it and made it worse than it had been. So I knew I had some really worn gears in the front, and like I said, the noise is only present in first through fourth because when you throw this in fifth gear, it just turns into direct drive right across the pinion shaft right here, and you are just going from clutch, input, pinion to ring gear. You bypass everything on that counter shaft, and this goes whisper quiet. I've got the ring and pinion set up great, no problems there. So I had a parts tractor, and I pulled that short input out of it as well as the counter shaft. So I've got the short input cleaned up. It's got excellent, nice and tight IH authentic bearings in it yet. The gears look awesome, and it's like cleaned up, ready just to take that noisy one out, drop this one in, we're good to go. Problem I found though, once I got into the constant mesh gear from the front of that counter shaft, I cleaned it up and I found that condensation and years of sitting had gotten to that parts tractor, and we've got some pretty deep rust pits in some of those gear teeth, just enough where I don't want to use this gear. So no problem. I go down to my local tractor salvage establishment yesterday. There's Farmall H's a dime a dozen around here. Surely they've got a gear. just my luck, about 3 hours before I got there, they sold the last constant mesh countershaft gear that they had already out of a tractor. And they said, no problem, we have several other H's in our yard, but as busy as we are, it's gonna be 2 to 3 days before we can get another one pulled out to sell you. And I'm like, wow, did you know that if they made more than one of something, and I'm talking to you, all right, that other people have parts, like the same parts that you might need from that tractor, and they will trade you those parts for money. You don't have to like create them out of your imagination. You don't have to like pull them from something else and try and make them fit. If this is what the rest of the world's been doing this whole time, I've been doing it all wrong. So now I've got 2 to 3 extra days to think on this back end. And when I start thinking, I get myself in trouble. But when I was in this, 2016, I think, is when I rebearinged all this. I noted back then that the drive side faces of both of the bull gears were less than pristine. We've got some brindling going on and some spalling, and they're worn. The reverse sides are still really good. I should have swapped the bull gears then, but I didn't. I put everything back the way it was. Let's just bite the bullet right now and swap those bull gears. We'll swap the bull pinions. Of course, that means the wheels come off, which they had to come off anyway. So the axles can come out, which I guess that'll make it easier to clean. So then the bull gears can come out because, well, we can do the swap then. And then we take the brake drums, the bull pinions, finally the differential carrier out, and we reset all of our meshes, all of our contacts, and we should be pretty well renewed in the back end of this tractor and never have to worry about anything in it again. I should have did all that the first time. I still could have left the whole back end, the back half of it alone, but I didn't. And we can make content out of it now. So we need to proceed with lightening this thing up and taking big parts off. So let's start with the wheel weights. One of those bolts was a little bit sticky. And as long as we're shedding weight, it's a good time just to take the PTO drive out, because, well, when we take that back end apart, we're going to need to have it out anyway. This is where I don't feel bad one bit about not running fluid in tires. This is where it's a lot nicer to work with now. And I don't like the leaks. I don't like the corrosion. People say, oh, but beet juice. I don't like beets either. So I just prefer to keep them dry. Do the tire walk. Another common theme that comes up in the comment section is anti-seize, and I've mentioned several times on here why I don't like anti-seize and I won't use it. In my experience, it just doesn't work. It's completely ineffective. But I look back, the last time I had these clamps, these locks off these wheels was in 2012, and I coated everything with just regular number 2 gun grease back then. Look at that. They're not going to fight me at all. There's no rust in there, no corrosion. And if I need something to stay rust-free, I avoid the anti-seize, because if that was anti-seize in this climate, that would have been dry and it would have just disappeared and these would have been rusty again. But look at it. Just trying to get the wrench out of it, pulling it out. For me, regular old grease has always done the job. So that's my go-to whenever I am working on something that is in a rather corrosion-prone environment. I had to hook this one a little bit different because I don't have room to swing out with the hoist because the shelf and everything's there. A little more tension up on it. Relying on the angle of the chain to kind of pull it along for me. There we go. Somewhat to that effect. Get it halfway off the axle before I even have to move anything. Now, don't hit that. Come on. Be good. Wheels always want to go their own direction. Well, everyone, it is the next day. Last night, I hustled and got the whole back end on jack stands, the jack out from under it, so I knew nothing could settle. It was going to be on terra firma until I could get back out here this morning. And I've done a few preps off camera. I've got the brake drums are ready to pull off of the bull pinions, so we might as well just get that done real quick. It's a lot easier to do if you've got two hands. But, yeah. There we are. Nice straight pull. Helps out quite a bit. I've also taken most of the bolts out of the axle housings. I have backed the bolts off on the bull gears, and the way I like to do that, I'll stick a bar through the webs in the center of the gears, and there's some bolt heads back there for the inner axle bearing retainers. Hook on a bolt head and then bind on the web, and then you can get in there with a wrench, crack those loose. And what else we got here? We're just about ready to set it down on the floor. Oh, I did want to talk about the belly pump drive coupling though that's on the front of the transmission first. But if it seems like I'm going through this rather quickly, it's because all this Farmall H stuff has been done and done pretty well already on YouTube. If you want a detailed step-by-step like I usually do on things, go hit up Kenny Kizzle, Rusty Nuts Ranch channel. He did his Memorial Farmall H, and he did a really comprehensive breakdown of every step to take apart, every step to put back together. So I'm not trying to expand upon anything that's already there. We're just getting the job done. That being said though, it is worth mentioning how I like to deal with this hydraulic belly pump coupling nut that's on the front of the counter shaft. You can see it just spins with the shaft. There's no really good way to hold it unless I've got the top cover off. I can then go and engage two gears simultaneously. That locks that whole transmission right up. You can now pull on that nut, crack it loose. And I always used to get confused whether or not the coupling nut on the tractor was the left-hand thread or the coupling nut on the belly pump was the left-hand thread, because one is standard, the other is backwards. The one on the tractor is the standard thread, and the way I came to remember that is tractors that were just the standard version did not have any options, didn't have a belly pump, so everything on the tractor is standard. The belly pump is the one that has the left-hand thread, and they do that so that when everything's in the normal direction of rotation, nothing is going to want to try to back itself loose. So best way to get these off is anything that fits that slot well. You could have just a flat piece of steel bar. In this case, this pry bar fits it pretty well, and with the transmission locked up, I just usually take like a rubber mallet. Sometimes you can even just pull them and they come loose, depends on how tight the last guy put them in. Just like that. We've got that cracked loose, and we can turn it the rest of the way out. So that's the easy way to remember how to deal with everything that's on the tractor and everything that's on the pump. Who made that gasket? Boy, it's really sticky, tight. Guys in a high quality gasket material, ooh, I tell you. There we go. All right, everybody, we've got the big gears out, and that's no bull. So before we carry on, we need to mark the setup of the ring and pinion, because we have shims beneath both of the bull pinion housings, as well as shims beneath the drive pinion rear bearing housing. That is going to set the mesh and the gear contact, and you can see I've got the marking compound on there along with the dial indicator. Everything's been proved out, and this is the part that throws a lot of people. With these ring and pinion sets, you want to see what would be a horrible contact pattern in anything else, all right? Because these are all on ball bearing mountings, and when everything comes under load, the gears are going to move and mesh differently than they are in a no-load state. So the best we can do is set this up according to the illustration in the manual. And this is what you want right here in a no-load state. You only want to see contact, heavy contact, centered on the very tip of the toe. You don't want to have anything going up to the heel. And the spec for backlash on the Series H is 8 to 12 thousandths. We're running a 9 thousandths backlash right now, and you can see we've got our heavy toe contact centered just as it should be, but that is so close to contacting up the rest of the active face of the tooth. If you look really close, you can see how that marking compound has just been touched, just skimmed by the drive pinion gear. So that tells me as soon as load is applied, that contact is going to drift the rest of the way up, and we are going to be full across the active face of that tooth. So we've got the setup documented, and we want to return back to where we are right now. I said before, in fifth gear, when we are direct drive, this thing's whisper quiet. So we've actually got a pretty stand-up ring and pinion set here. When we swap those bull pinions, we don't want any of that to change. So our noisy input can come out. Again, with these guys with the high quality gaskets, what's going on here? Wants to stick to both sides. There we go. Pinion shaft next. You have to watch the sliding gears because they will slide off the front if you're not careful. Keeping track of all of our shims. Nothing left behind. 2 of the bull pinion bolts can be used as pullers because there's threaded holes right there and right there. Just make sure you've removed the large bull gear from the inside first, because this bull pinion housing does surround it. If you don't take the big bull gears out first, you will break the housing. It has been known to happen. And with the second bull pinion housing pulled out from the case a little bit, we should have enough room to get the carrier out. If the bull pinion gear doesn't want to come with it, which it's wanting to come with it, yep. Get out of the way, you behave. There we go. Reverse idler now, and pay attention to the orientation of the gear. The noticeable mesh side is to the back wall of the case. They will fit in backwards, but they don't work very well in that configuration. There, I've pulled the shaft out from the other direction, and gear comes out. And finally the counter shaft comes out, and here's the condensed version of the removal. I take the seal retainer off the front. You can then bump the shaft backward out of the bearing comes out, and this is where the book procedure says to then bump the rear bearing off of the shaft. Of course, you have this this snap ring right here. You have to disengage first, which is always really fun. But the way I like to do it is to move the counter shaft back as far as I can once that front bearing is off, and then I can fit this 3-jaw puller on there and in a controlled manner pull the bearing off. I like to avoid striking bearings whenever possible. And I've got this heavy steel puck over the end of the shaft because you don't want the forcing screw of the puller to go into the end of the shaft and mess up that bearing in there that the whole PTO drive needs to spin on. So get this bearing off the back. We can pull that counter shaft the rest of the way out. There, bearing is free. Snap ring, rear bearing. Yeah, it's kind of funny for a guy that was not going to split a tractor. You can't get any more split. We did it all. But, all right, so next episode I'll get this noisy bugger off of the front of the counter shaft, and then the input, of course, here is ready to go. Hopefully by then my local tractor establishment has found me another constant mesh counter shaft gear. What can I say? A lot of cleaning to do now, and I think I'm going to roll the cleaning of this case into a How I Clean Parts episode, because a lot of people have been requesting that in the comment section lately. So be on the lookout for that. I think that's going to serve as a pretty good example of some of the things I do to get parts clean. Thank you for watching, everyone. Plenty for me to keep busy with here. Hope to see y'all back next time.